Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's free webinar delivered to you by Pam Wellness. My name is Sadia, and I'm a business psychologist for Pam Wellness, and I conduct webinars like the one that you're attending today, workplace needs assessments, and coaching sessions as well. So, before I continue, I just want Adam, my colleague, to introduce himself. Adam.
Hi, thanks, Adia, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for your attendance. As I say, my name is Adam Brazendale. I'm the Senior Mental Health Trainer for Pam Wellness. My role involves the design, development and facilitation of a number of webinars, broadcasts and workshops on the many topics of mental health and mental wellbeing. And today, I'm absolutely delighted to be invited here again to present this session with Sadia on imposter syndrome and neurodiversity and how you can build your resilience and confidence in this area. So I look forward to the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that then, Adam. So before we continue, I just want to remind you that today's webinars are just taste sessions, so they're designed to provide you a free high-level understanding of today's topic, which is neurodiversity and imposter syndrome. If you do have any questions, please ask these in the question and answer throughout the webinar, and we will answer these questions at the end of the session. If you do have any questions or want to understand how we can support you in the workplace, then please do get in touch, and you can do that via email, as you can see on the bottom of the slide there. Okay, so I'm going to start by just taking a look at what neurodiversity is and how it's defined. So neurodiversity is an umbrella term which aims to capture a number of learning and developmental difficulties, and it's defined as the concept that neurological differences such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia and other neurodiverse conditions are the result of normal, natural variation in the human genome. Now, neurodiversity should be viewed as a positive and valuable aspect of human diversity, which can enhance innovation, creativity, and problem solving in all areas of life. And we're trying to move away from this medical model of abnormality or something that needs curing. The conditions that come under neurodiversity, it's important to understand that they are lifelong conditions. They cannot be cured, but they can be successfully managed. It's estimated that around 1 in 7 people are neurodivergent, so that makes it quite a significant aspect of human diversity. So, shown here are some of the key conditions that come under neurodiversity. So we have dyslexia, that encompasses difficulties with reading and writing, dyscalculia, difficulties with numbers. We have autism spectrum condition, which encompasses social and communication difficulties, ADHD, so difficulties with hyperactivity, focus and concentration. And we have dyspraxia, also called developmental coordination disorder, and that entails difficulties with what we call motor coordination, so coordination of your larger and your smaller muscle groups, and balance difficulties as well. Now, it's important to understand that all of these conditions are what we call neurological or brain-based conditions, meaning that people that are neurodiverse will have a different innate way of processing information. Also want to highlight that these conditions are often referred to as hidden disabilities, and that's because they are not as obvious as physical disabilities. But the point is that these conditions will have been persistent, so present since childhood. You can't just develop these conditions, but having said that, we do know that sometimes a stroke or a brain trauma or an injury to the head can bring on these conditions. Now, it's not just about the challenges that neurodiverse individuals face. Research has shown that neurodivergent individuals do have many strengths like the ones that I have shown here. They are by no means exhaustive, there are others as well. So we do know that research has shown that neurodiverse individuals can be highly creative individuals, they can be visual thinkers, they can be good problem solvers. They can also be very good at processing auditory information around them. They may have difficulties with their short-term working memories, but we do know that they can have very good long-term memories. They can be very analytical, original thinkers. They can be quite flexible and adaptive in their approach. They can be highly productive, good verbal communicators. If you think about the daily challenges faced by neurodiverse individuals, it does make them, excuse me, it does make them very determined, resilient and perseverant individuals. And because of the difficulties that they face, it does make them more empathetic towards the struggles of other people. So unfortunately, it's very easy for us to focus on areas of difficulty. We do that with ourselves, we do that with others, but it is important to understand that neurodiverse individuals do have many strengths, and that's what we should be focused on. And in fact, research has shown that embracing neurodiversity can foster a more inclusive environment. And indeed, teams, organisations and companies that do embrace neurodiversity can gain a competitive advantage across many aspects, including things like productivity, innovation, culture and talent retention. So we've looked a little bit at neurodiversity. I now want to take a look at what imposter syndrome actually is. Now, imposter syndrome, sometimes known as imposter phenomenon or imposterism, is a psychological pattern characterized by persistent self-doubt and a pervasive fear of being exposed as a fraud, despite evident successes and achievements. Now, often individuals that do experience imposter syndrome often attribute their accomplishments to luck or external factors rather than acknowledging their own abilities. And this phenomenon is particularly prevalent amongst neurodivergent individuals, including those with the conditions such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and others. Now, despite their talents and achievements, neurodivergent individuals do often wrestle with feelings of being undeserving of their success, and they may set excessively high standards for themselves, leading to perfectionism and overworking to ensure that every detail is flawless. And this cycle of self-doubt, fear, and over-preparation can result in significant stress and burnout as individuals struggle to internalize their successes. Now, Neurodiverse individuals do often experience unique manifestations of imposter syndrome. As well as the difficulties mentioned, they also experience challenges such as heightened sensitivity to criticism, where negative comments reinforce feelings of inadequacy. They may also struggle with social interactions, finding it difficult to read social cues and often feeling out of place in social or professional settings. Comparisons to neurotypical standards can lead to feelings of inferiority and pressure to conform to conventional expectations, which can then lead on to what we call masking behaviours. And masking involves altering your natural behaviours and emotions to conform to neurotypical expectations. So that can include things like mimicking social cues, suppressing any what we call stimming behaviours. So these are repetitive actions and behaviours that people engage in to find comfort in their environment. And also masking can involve concealing any intense emotions to fit into any sort of social situations. Now, whilst masking can help to navigate social situations, it can lead to mental and emotional exhaustion as individuals strive to maintain a facade. So if you think about presenting yourself as something that you are not day in, day out, that can leave you fatigued mentally and physically as well. So I'm now going to pass you over to Adam, who will take a look at the different types of imposter syndrome. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you very much, Sadia. Some points there that were very interesting to myself there, and thank you for that. I'll take a lot from listening to those points, and I'm sure our guests here this afternoon will as well. So we're going to look now at different types of imposter syndrome. As Sadia said before, imposter syndrome is a psychological phenomenon. It's not a diagnosable mental health condition, although it has been linked and there is a susceptibility, even though it shares some traits of anxiety and depression to those, because of some of the things that he's just mentioned there. People, masking, struggling with social interactions, comparing themselves to neurotypical standards, can then bring on stress, burnout, which can eventually lead to physical and psychological difficulties like anxiety and depression. So it's really important, therefore, to understand a little bit of the types of imposter syndrome that exist, so we can get an understanding of how it might present and some of the internal rules that people with imposter syndrome tend to follow. So I'm going to read some of out to you now. And as I go through this, I'd like to think about your own situation, or maybe those that you work around with, particularly those neurodivergent individuals who are in your workplace, and to see if you can spot any of these in yourself or others. So in 2011, Dr. Valerie Young proposed 5 different types of imposter syndrome. And the first that she proposed was the perfectionist. And the perfectionist likes to do things perfectly. Their main concern is how something is done. A slight error, a slight defect is enough to classify a piece of work as a failure and therefore lead them to feelings of shame and guilt. Next is the superhero. Their success is based on how many different types of roles they can play. They need to be, for example, a good father, mother, son, daughter, partner, boss, brother, and or friend, amongst others. They tend to always work longer, do not always take their days off, and if they can't play any of the many roles perfectly that they identify with, they feel like a complete fraud. Next is the expert. Experts seek to know everything. Their main concern is what and how much they know or can do. If they find themselves in the face of even the slightest lack of knowledge about a topic, they feel like a failure. Next is the natural genius. Their aim is to achieve their goals quickly and effortlessly. They begin to doubt themselves and feel very ashamed when work starts to get difficult and if they can't achieve their objectives in their first try. And then is the soloist. Their need is to do things alone without help from anyone. Their main concern is who completes the work. If someone helps them, they interpret that as a sign of their weakness and failure. So, in the chat there, I wonder if any of you can maybe identify with any of those. Let's just have a quick snap poll in the chat there. Can any of you identify or have seen some of those amongst yourselves or colleagues? And maybe that also may be something that changes depending on what circumstances you're in. It may be that you can identify with a few there. Someone's putting, I feel like I can identify with all of them. Yeah, absolutely. Multiple, yeah, quite a few people can see there's a few hybrid ones there. Yeah, somebody said the second one there. Superhero, unrealistic standard on all fronts. Seeing the soloist in colleagues. That's important. Yeah, 4 out of the 5, and definitely a most. Okay. Well, they put their soloist. I thought it was a control freak. Well, there you go. Hopefully that again can help to normalize and humanize some of these things that we've just been talking about as well. Okay, fantastic. Thanks very much, everybody. Thought that'd be helpful. So let's move on and have a look at some other ways in which imposter syndrome might present in the workplace. Now, it's quite often the case that imposters go beyond their job description at work to help colleagues. Sarah Hudson, who's an associate professor and director of the PhD program at Wren School of Business, and her colleague, Professor Helena Gonzalez Gomez, wrote that the imposter syndrome is often expressed as shame in response to both simulated and recalled real work events, and therefore there's often a tendency for imposters to go beyond the remit of their role to help others at work. And they also assert that together the imposter syndrome and shame deplete resources such that the imposter suffers reduced ability to perform well at work in the short term with negative consequences for career success. Obviously linked into what we were saying before about attributing their successes to either others or good luck. And they also found out that when an imposter experiences shame, there's also a negative effect on creativity, one of those attributes we said before that is often attributed to neurodivergent individuals. And the detrimental effect on creativity is often worsened in organizations where there's less flexibility in work processes, less flexibility with rules, and less flexibility in regulations. And their findings also unearthed the discovery that older employees and those with more work experience were less likely to suffer from the syndrome, and that imposter syndrome is likely to be detrimental to younger employees starting out in their career and those returning to work after being away from the workplace for long periods of time, maybe due to ill health, pregnancy, maternity, etc. So again, just putting it out there for the group, did any of that ring true? Or is anything in there that you found that may have struck a chord with you as an individual? Again, put your thoughts there in the chat. Or maybe you don't concur with some of the things in there. What do you put in there? Number 1. So they going beyond your job description there, yeah, and somebody else, and somebody else, and somebody else, yeah, quite a few people there. The more stressed I am, the less creative. Agree with some, yeah, again, number 1 there too as well. Again, some negative effects on creativity. A few there as well. Okay, so again, these can be things that we can often pick up as signs that there may be things going on there that we maybe need to look at internally as well and maybe get the support. And again, later on in the session, we're going to look at ways to maybe overcome some of the symptoms of imposter syndrome in the work that you do. But before we do, I'm going to hand back over to Sadia, and I'll be back later on to go through some of those ways in looking at how we can maybe put strategies in place that could be really useful there. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Adam. Similarly, so we've spoken a little bit about imposter syndrome. I also want to take a look at the benefits of embracing neurodiversity. And then Adam will take a look at some of the strategies that you can put in place for to help with any feelings of imposter syndrome. So when it comes to neurodiversity, it's not just about the struggles that people face. It's about trying to understand what we can do to embrace the benefits that neurodiverse individuals can bring to the table. And why should we even bother embracing neurodiversity? Well, that's because embracing neurodiversity can help to foster creativity, innovation, and problem solving by bringing diverse perspectives to the table. Now, what's the point of that? Well, that can help. So this diversity of perspectives can help to drive progress and lead to breakthroughs in various fields. And what it also does is it helps to create a culture of acceptance and belonging where people feel valued for their unique talents and their talents and their contributions. And research has shown that organizations that do embrace neurodiversity do often experience higher employee engagement, productivity, and retention rates. Because if neurodiverse individuals feel more included in the workplace, then that can lead to support and accommodations, and then that can lead to a more equitable workplace for everyone. So therefore, embracing neurodiversity is not only the morally correct thing to do, but it's also quite beneficial for driving innovation and achieving success. So I want to share with you a couple of personal stories that do reflect on the common experiences and successes of individuals overcoming imposter syndrome within neurodiverse communities. So Emily is a 30-year-old graphic designer that's been diagnosed with ADHD since childhood. Now, despite her creative talents and innovative ideas, she has constantly doubted her abilities due to her challenges associated with ADHD, which sometimes leads to impulsivity and difficulty focusing on detailed tasks. Now, Emily struggled with comparing herself to her neurotypical colleagues who seemed to effortlessly meet deadlines and present polished work. She often felt like she was faking it and feared that others would discover that she wasn't as competent as they thought she was. So what happened was that Emily attended a workshop on imposter syndrome tailored for individuals, for neurodivergent individuals, and she realized that her unique perspective and her creative approach were in fact valuable assets in her field. So what she started to do is that she started to reframe her thoughts, reminding herself of her past successes, driven by her creativity and her unique problem-solving skills. And I've simplified it and I have summarized it, and I know that it can be quite difficult. But what happened in Emily's case is that She actually began sharing her ideas more confidently in team meetings. She also sought mentorship from a senior designer who did really appreciate her fresh perspective. And because of that support and that mentorship, she did successfully pitch a new branding concept that received really positive client feedback, which boosted her confidence further. So the point is that Emily learned to embrace her neurodiversity as a source of strength rather than a limitation. And by acknowledging her unique skills and seeking support from mentors who understood her challenges, she managed her imposter syndrome much better and did eventually flourish in her career. Another success story is so I've got a case study of somebody called John who overcame imposter syndrome within a neurodiverse context. And John is a 55-year-old executive who was diagnosed with dyslexia later in life. And that's the experience of a lot of older people. These days, these conditions are diagnosed much younger. Now, a bit of background. So John had worked in the finance industry for over 30 years, holding senior management positions in several multinational corporations. Throughout his career, John struggled with written communications, particularly with reports and presentations. Despite his experience, his extensive experience, and a very successful track record in managing large teams and multi-million-dollar projects, he often doubted his abilities when it came to written documentation and formal correspondence. So what happened? Well, after attending a leadership seminar which focused on workplace diversity and inclusion, John actually learned more about his dyslexia and the impact that it was actually having on his professional life. And he realized that his challenges with written communications were actually related to his dyslexia and not a reflection of his overall competence. So, encouraged by the insights that he gained from this seminar, John actually sought the support from his HR department to explore assistive technologies out there, such as speech to text software and text to speech software, which can help as well for drafting reports and presentations. And indeed, with this explosion of AI, writing or literacy tasks have never been easier. John also enrolled in a dyslexia support group for professionals where he was able to connect with others that were facing similar challenges, and they exchanged strategies for overcoming some of the difficulties that they were facing. So again, the point is that with the implementation of accommodations and support from his colleagues, John's confidence in his abilities started to grow quite significantly, and then he began to focus more on leveraging his strengths in strategic thinking, problem solving, and team leadership, rather than dwelling on his perceived weaknesses in written communications. So the key takeaway here is that John's journey exemplifies the importance of self-awareness, education, and seeking appropriate accommodations in overcoming imposter syndrome associated with neurodiversity. And by embracing his dyslexia as part of his identity and leveraging supportive resources, he not only enhanced his professional effectiveness, but also inspired his team to embrace diversity and inclusivity in the workplace. So these were a couple of success stories which I thought was really important to share with you. And I'm now going to pass you over to Adam, who will give you some strategies to help you manage or cope with imposter syndrome.
Thank you, Sadia. And again, it's great to hear so many success stories when it comes to imposter syndrome and neurodiversity. And hopefully, some of the things that we're going to propose in the next slide also back up what Sadia was just saying there as well. Now, to help develop strategies which can help overcome imposter syndrome, and first of all, it's important to look at the signs of imposter syndrome that come up in our day-to-day lives, because this is often one area in which we forget to consider that we might be struggling with this, is to recognize it and how it might occur. So you might suffer from imposter syndrome if you feel like you've got lucky when actually you prepared well and worked hard. You might suffer from imposter syndrome if you find it hard to accept praise or you apologize for yourself when you didn't do something wrong. You might suffer from imposter syndrome if you hold yourself to incredibly, sometimes impossibly high standards, or you find the fear of failure paralyzing. You might suffer from imposter syndrome if you avoid avoid expressing confidence because you think people see it as overcompensating or being obnoxious, or you're convinced that you're not. Now, it's really important that we pay attention to our language choices, especially when talking to other people and when talking to yourself, especially when talking about work as well, because if you find your own success or the praise others give you uncomfortable, then maybe do some reflective thinking on where those types of thoughts came from and what it means to you in your professional life. And as Sadia said, one of the case studies there were able to overcome their imposter syndrome by talking it through with a mentor, because no one should suffer in silence, and sharing your thoughts and your experiences with someone else will make you better equipped to deal with your imposter syndrome. So talk these through and share them with somebody, again, a trusted senior colleague, your mind manager, and they might be able to give you a more objective point of view, especially if they work on a different team. And when you share your experiences with them, you might ask them if they've ever felt that way or if they know someone else who has. Humanizing, normalizing your feelings can be a way of letting go of the internal pressures that you might put on yourself when in imposter mode. Your line manager or mentor or your trusted colleague may also have the knowledge and tools to help you overcome your imposter syndrome in the context of your current job role. And let go of perfectionism. Sometimes I leave that little M at the end underneath. I did it in the previous slides that I had, and it was one that I would really struggle to get that line in with the M, so I left it in there because often, if we don't let go of perfectionism, it can be a major setback for productivity. Perfectionism can only feed into our imposter syndrome. So when we're feeling like a fraud, it's often because we're comparing ourselves to some perfect outcome that's either impossible or unrealistic. Now, not can only no one do everything perfectly, but actually trying to hold yourself to that standard can actually be counterproductive. So instead, take a step back and ask yourself this question: when is good good enough? While striving for perfection is certainly noble, it's usually an idealistic aim rather than any smart goal. And again, it's often counterproductive and will only make you feel more like a fraud. And it's really important that you're also kind to yourself. Imposter syndrome can manifest itself as a voice in our heads berating us with negative messages like you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're a fraud. A negative self-talk like that can become a bad habit. So try instead to be kind to yourself. And that simply means changing the way you talk to yourself in your head by practicing positive self-talk. Not only can it help you become less stressed and anxious, but it can also help you build the courage and confidence to do things that will bring you the greater rewards. And so to do that, track your successes. When we're feeling like an imposter, one of the hardest things to grasp is how much of a role we've had in our own successes. Again, you might default them to look or others' hard work, when in fact your own work, knowledge, and preparation had a lot to do with it. So to help yourself show that you're actually doing well, keep track of your wins. Now, there's lots of different ways to do this, and the matrix you'll use will depend entirely on your job. But you might want to keep tab on the words people have written to you on email, Twitter, blog comments, and so on. And in the same vein as keeping track of your successes, keep files on your computer of positive wins and positive reinforcements, both at work and your personal life. Now, this can be anything from a job offer acceptance email or letter, praise from a colleague or even your boss. And an updated CV is a really useful way to demonstrate to yourself the success you've achieved in your whole career. So when you need a lift, open that up and scroll through them. Oop, back a page there. There we go. And it's also really important to be more positive and saying yes to new opportunities. Now, of course, it's impossible to say yes to everything, especially when you're feeling stressed or spread thin. But it's all too common for people who have imposter syndrome to turn down career making opportunities because they don't feel like they'll do a good enough job. So when you're presented with a new opportunity, it's important to distinguish between the voice in your head saying you can't do it because you're not worthy, and the one saying you can't do it because you've got too much on your plate. The former is your imposter syndrome speaking. Taking on challenging new work and doing well at it can open a lot of doors for you. So don't let your inner imposter turn down these game changing opportunities. They can do wonders to help you learn, grow, and advance your career. So keep this famous quote in mind. If someone offers you an amazing opportunity and you're not sure you can do it, say yes, then learn how to do it later. And finally, embrace the feeling and use it. We know what the feeling's called. We know others suffer from it. We know a little bit about it and why we feel this way. And now, hopefully, you might know how to handle it. So invite it in and remind yourself why it's there and what it means. And whenever you hear that negative voice in your head, pause for a minute, take a deep breath, say to yourself, welcome back, old friend. I'm glad you're here, and let's get back to work. But hopefully, some of those things you might have found helpful. And if so, put some of those into practice. Thank you. Adia?
Okay, thank you for that, Adam. So just want to sum up today's session then. In conclusion, it is important to understand and embrace neurodiversity, because then that can help to foster an inclusive and supportive workplace environment. Additionally, excuse me, addressing imposter syndrome is crucial for empowering yourself and others to contribute more confidently and authentically. And also, by creating a workplace culture that does value diversity and provides the necessary support and accommodations, we can help people, we can help each other to thrive and ensure that everyone feels valued and capable of reaching their full potential. So here at Pan Wellness, we, the idea of today's session was just to highlight what we offer here at Pan Wellness. We do offer many awareness sessions, training and workshop in lots of different areas, as you can see here. And we can also tailor packages to your individual needs. If you are interested in finding out more, please do get in touch. You can do that via email or telephone. And I'll just quickly highlight this as well. And if you do wish to leave any feedback, you can do that also on our Trustpilot page. We do have a few minutes, so I don't believe there's any questions in the Q&A. I'm just taking a look. If you do have any questions, this is now an opportunity for you to ask any questions that you may have. Yeah, you can put them in the Q&A, you can put them in the chat. I'm sure we'll be happy to pick them up. If you don't have any questions, maybe you can share your thoughts and your experiences on neurodiversity or imposter syndrome. I think we've just had Dr. Singh post something there. Greetings of the utmost elegance to you this fine evening. Not sure, not quite a question. Maybe you want to expand on that one. Okay, so Susan, you ask, is it only people with neurodiversity that have this syndrome? Absolutely not. Anybody can experience imposter syndrome. But we do know that if you're neurodiverse, some people that it doesn't mean that if you're neurodiverse, you will have imposter syndrome either. They can be standalone conditions, they can co-occur, so not always necessarily.
So I was just putting there, I was concerned over being more confident with what I'm doing and challenging that aspect of myself because I'm concerned on boarding arrogance, etc. What are your thoughts on monitoring this? Great question.
Great question.
I would suggest, and again, I can only put my opinion here because it is, not something we can give sort of factual suggestions to us. But I look at it and say, where do those concerns come from? You know, where is that concern coming? Where's that? Is it a negative voice that's saying, "Oh, you don't want to be doing this"? And then maybe asking yourself, well, where's that coming from? Is that something that I've picked up that if I talk about things, people from my past would have said that's being arrogant, that's being, being big-headed, etc. Or is that something that you feel very strongly about? Because if it's others, let them own it. Okay, embrace, I would say, the success and rewards that you've done because you've worked hard for them. You've put effort into them. You've obviously worked towards that. So I would say have a listen and attribute that voice to the person who owns it. And if it's a negative self-talk, it often comes from those that are significant to us, parents, teachers, etc., and let them own it. If you do say, actually, no, that's something I truly believe in as well. Okay, how's that going? Okay, is it impacting my levels of confidence? Okay, so just ask yourself, and if you want to get a different perspective, maybe ask a friend, a colleague, and what their thoughts are. But try and go with how you're feeling about that. I hope that helps a little bit there. Where does that concern come from? You're welcome, Joe. You got any others? Do you want to take the next one? It's a comment rather than a question. I work much harder than a lot of people, as I've always had to. I'm very dyslexic. I'm fed up with working so hard. Yeah.
That's can I take that one? So
Yeah, please do.
That's quite a common experience of neurodiverse individuals, sadly and unfortunately. I do see a lot of people here that are neurodiverse, are specifically dyslexic, and unfortunately they do they always work harder and longer than their neurotypical peers. And that can have a negative impact on your overall well-being, Rosie. So I don't know how much assistive technologies you use. They can be quite useful when it comes to reading and writing tasks. In Word, you can use, I don't know if you do it already, but like there is a read aloud function, which we know. So if you get something read out to you, that's cognitively less demanding than having to read information yourself. And often dyslexic individuals will have to reread information multiple times. So hearing the information, research has shown, can help. Writing information, there are things like AI and Grammarly, which can support you in your writing tasks. I don't know if this is your experience, but I know that a lot of dyslexic individuals do reach out to their colleagues as well to read the information that they've written, and that's that can leave you feelings of imposing upon already busy colleagues. So one of the things you can do is maybe ask for a workplace buddy or a mentor to support you in such tasks.
Yeah.
So I
And
hope that
just
helps.
backing up what you're saying,
Please.
Sadia, that I'm dyslexic as well. And I
Okay.
found that when I was doing step care assessments for psychological assessments that we were doing, that when I was reading back the assessments on Word, I could read it 2 or 3 times and go over the same mistake 2 or 3 times and it'd still be there. Obviously, my head saying, yeah, that's the correct word because I've wrote it, so it should be right. But when I used the read aloud, I found it much, much easier to spot the mistakes and therefore wasn't having so many reports come back to me with grammatical errors. And I used that to my advantage because actually I also told colleagues about it and they're going, even though they didn't have dyslexia, they were saying I find it a lot easier than just reading it because they were getting eye strain all the time. Actually, just listening to it as well allowed them to just quickly go through it. So they found that really helpful as well. So yeah, I would highly recommend that read aloud if you're checking documents. Again, there's lots of assistive technology that can help with writing as well. So again, maybe just reach out to HR. Is there any way that you can get some of that used as well? So I hope that helps. Is it Paolo? Sorry, Paolo says, does the inner critic fall into the imposter syndrome? Absolutely, absolutely. We think about the negative self-talk. You're not good enough. You're not enough. You're not worthy. That's rubbish. Why did you make? All comes into it. Absolutely, yeah. So that negative inner critic, we all have one. We pick them up. It's about turning the volume down on it sometimes and asking ourselves, is this going to be helpful for me? What I do with clients is often say to them, try and link that to the person whose voice you can tell is telling that to you. Who is that critic? Is it you, or is it your mum, your dad, your teacher, your grandparents? Whose is that voice? And let them own it. But yeah, absolutely, it does also come into that a great deal. Yeah, so I hope that helps. You're very welcome. Hey, I don't think there's any other questions in there. We've come to the end of our time. Just one further thing, ICT accommodations can help and filling in the pound well-being with my manager's help, but I do feel that due to the layout of the offices and building, it can be difficult to manage the other issues to do with being neurodiverse. Absolutely. So things like, again, I used to work in a very busy office and found it very difficult to concentrate on what I was trying to do when there was all this other chatter going on. So I used to ask for adjustments in place that could be put in, like, can I work in a room on my own, but come back to work with the group when I felt like I could? Because I didn't want to just be on my own all day, because that wouldn't help. But neither did I want it to be there when I could hear everything else, going to end up typing what I was hearing, or it just became too much cognitive load. So yeah, absolutely can see where you're coming from there, and hopefully some of those things that maybe other workplace adjustments that your manager could put in place may also be useful as well. And if that's not possible, other ways of maybe lowering down the noise that goes in there, like pitch and volume of tone of ringtones, maybe participations, those sorts of things. Okay, we've come to the end of today's session. I hope everybody is able to take something from it. I'd like to thank you all for your attendances. Anything you'd like to say before we finish as well, Sadia?
No, just to say thank you very much for your engagement and your participation and your presence here. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye-bye. You're very welcome. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for the claps. Do leave us a review. There we are.
There you go.
You look like a superstar now, don't you, Adam? I do.
Okay. Thanks very much, everyone. Take care now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.